In 4 hours, Earth would be destroyed. No nuclear explosions, no asteroids, no war. It would be silent, clean, perfect. And nobody suspected the 3 women responsible. They arrived 15 years ago in capsules that slipped through our atmosphere like whispers, invisible to every radar, every satellite, every defense system humanity had built. Inside each one was a child, 10 years old, with innocent eyes and perfect smiles. They were adopted by loving families, given human names, tucked into beds at night, and taught to say their prayers. But they weren't children. They were machines. Android aliens programmed to grow, to learn, to infiltrate. And when they turned 25, to destroy, today was that day. 3 continents had been chosen. The first android landed in London, adopted by a wealthy family who'd lost their daughter to leukemia. The second touched down in Beijing, taken in by scientists who saw in her an opportunity to give back to the world. The third arrived in Washington, D.C., welcomed by retired military officers who'd always wanted a child but never had the time. They had human names now: Emma, Li Wei, and Sarah. They had birth certificates, medical records, school transcripts. And they had a mission encoded in their neural cores: study humanity, gain strategic positions, and at 25 years old, execute the plan. But there was a problem. One of them had learned to feel. Emma cured cancer at 20 years old. The announcement shook the medical world. Researchers who'd spent their entire careers chasing the solution watched in stunned silence as this young woman presented a treatment so elegant, so perfect, that it seemed to come from another world. Because it did. She knew exactly where to look, because the technology was already inside her, downloaded from a civilization that had conquered disease millennia ago. Governments worshipped her. Hospitals restructured themselves around her protocols. Millions of lives were saved. But nobody questioned how a 20-year-old woman had surpassed decades of research. Nobody wondered why she never got sick, never showed exhaustion, never made mistakes. She was a miracle, and people desperately wanted to believe in miracles. A security guard named Thomas saw something once during a routine safety drill at the research facility. A weapon accidentally discharged near Emma. He watched, frozen, as she moved before the sound of the gunshot finished echoing. Impossible reflexes, faster than human neurology should allow. He started to report it, started to raise questions. The next week, he disappeared. His car was found at the bottom of a ravine, ruled an accident. Nobody connected it to Emma. Nobody even thought to try. Li Wei didn't save lives. She created the future. At 19, she unveiled solid hologram technology that made science fiction look primitive. At 21, she developed quantum artificial intelligence that revolutionized global defense systems. At 23, she built autonomous weapon platforms so advanced that military analysts called them technological magic. But they weren't magic. They were alien technology disguised as human genius, carefully calibrated to advance Earth's military capabilities without revealing their true source. Li Wei was different from the others. She possessed something Emma and Sarah didn't: an intact alien control core and an emotion blocker. While the other 2 androids could develop feelings if their programming allowed, Li Wei felt nothing. No compassion, no doubt, no fear, no hesitation. Her core maintained direct contact with the alien civilization through quantum entanglement, sending daily reports, receiving updated instructions. She was the bridge between worlds, and that made her the most dangerous. Sarah didn't invent anything. She didn't need to. Because Sarah understood something more powerful than technology or medicine. She understood people. She became an expert in military psychology, specializing in negotiation, manipulation, and strategic influence. She worked her way into the Pentagon, advising on international relations, whispering in the right ears at the right times. Her greatest achievement was Russia. Through a carefully orchestrated series of diplomatic maneuvers, intelligence leaks, and psychological pressure, she engineered the capture of the Russian president and the systematic dismantling of their military arsenal. She did it without firing a shot, without anyone realizing they'd been manipulated. The United States emerged as the undisputed global superpower, and Sarah stood at the center of that power. She was chosen as the mission leader for a reason. Strategy, patience, perfect understanding of human weakness. Her role was to position herself at the heart of global control, to be ready when the invasion came. And she'd done it flawlessly. But something was changing inside her. Something her creators hadn't anticipated. His name was Daniel Carter. 30 years old, military analyst, former Army intelligence with 3 tours in conflict zones that taught him to read people the way others read books. He had an IQ of 158 and instincts honed by years of hunting enemies who hid in plain sight. He worked alongside Sarah at the Pentagon, and 6 months ago they'd started dating. At first it was attraction. She was brilliant, beautiful, and seemed genuinely interested in his work. Then it became admiration. She challenged him intellectually, made him think harder, push further. But eventually, slowly, it became something else. Suspicion. Small details. Things most people wouldn't notice. She never sweated, even after they'd climbed 5 flights of stairs when the elevator was broken. Never showed nervousness, even during presentations to 4-star generals. Never got scared, even when they'd walked through a part of DC where 3 people had been mugged that month. One night changed everything. They were walking back to his apartment, laughing about something a colleague had said, when a car jumped the curb 2 blocks away. Daniel heard it, the squeal of tires, the revving engine. He turned his head to look. Sarah had already moved him, pulled him sideways with strength that didn't match her frame, positioned her body between him and the oncoming vehicle. The car screamed past where he'd been standing half a second earlier, smashed into a storefront, and exploded in a ball of flame. Sarah didn't have a scratch. Daniel had a broken arm from where he'd hit the ground, and a gash across his forehead from the concrete. "How did you know?" he asked in the emergency room. "Know what?" "The car. You moved before I even saw it." She'd smiled, touched his face gently. "Instinct. I guess I just got lucky." But luck didn't explain how she'd moved him with such force. Luck didn't explain her complete lack of injury. Luck didn't explain the odd coldness of her skin when she'd touched him. Daniel started investigating. Quietly. Carefully. He used his security clearance to access databases most Pentagon employees didn't know existed. Late at night, when Sarah thought he was working on analysis reports, he was actually tracing her digital footprint backward through time. What he found disturbed him more than he wanted to admit. He discovered that her medical records before age 10 were wildly inconsistent. Different blood types listed at different hospitals, dental x-rays that showed bone structures that didn't match each other, vaccination schedules that contradicted themselves in ways that should have raised red flags, but somehow never did. Someone had created a paper trail, but they'd made it too perfect, too clean. Real human records were messy, full of administrative errors and inconsistencies. Sarah's were pristine except for contradictions so subtle you'd only notice if you were specifically looking. He managed to get a DNA sample from a hairbrush at her apartment. When he had it analyzed by a private lab, paying cash, using a fake name, taking precautions that made him feel paranoid and justified in equal measure, the results showed markers that didn't align with standard human genetics. Strange repeated sequences. Symmetries that shouldn't exist in naturally evolved DNA. The lab technician called it the cleanest sample I've ever seen, not realizing that cleanliness itself was the anomaly. Then there were the photographs. He pulled every image of Sarah he could find from age 10 to 25. Most people show irregular growth patterns, spurts during puberty, occasional weight fluctuations, changes in facial structure as bones develop. Sarah's progression was perfectly linear. She grew exactly 3.2 inches per year from age 10 to 16, then stopped. Her facial proportions maintained exact mathematical ratios throughout. It was as if someone had created a growth algorithm and executed it without variation, and he noticed something worse. Sarah was always 3 steps ahead of every strategic decision made at the Pentagon. Not because she was brilliant, though she was. But because she seemed to know what would happen before anyone decided it. Like she had access to information she shouldn't have. He told his superior and best friend, Colonel Marcus Reed, on a rainy Thursday evening. They met in Reed's car in an empty parking garage 3 levels underground, the concrete walls ensuring no electronic surveillance could reach them. Rain hammered on the roof as Daniel spread out his evidence on the dashboard. Printouts, photos, lab results, behavioral analyses. Reed looked at it all for a long time. You think she's what, exactly? A spy? Some kind of enhanced soldier from a Black Ops program we don't know about? I think she's not human. Reed had laughed, a short, uncomfortable bark of sound that echoed in the enclosed space. Then he'd seen Daniel's face, the absolute seriousness in his eyes, and stopped. You're serious. I think we need to investigate, quietly, thoroughly, just to rule it out if nothing else. But Marcus, something's wrong here. Everything I've found points to something that shouldn't be possible. They spent 2 weeks gathering more evidence, using their combined access and expertise. Reed contributed his own observations, times he'd seen Sarah demonstrate knowledge she couldn't possibly have, moments when her reactions seemed just slightly off, like an actor who'd studied a role perfectly, but couldn't quite capture the spontaneity of real emotion. The more they looked, the clearer the pattern became. When they finally had enough to confront her, when they'd built a case that couldn't be explained away by coincidence or misunderstanding, Sarah beat them to it. She called Daniel to an abandoned warehouse in Alexandria, 20 minutes outside the city. He knew it might be a trap. He knew she might kill him. He went anyway, because some part of him still hoped he was wrong, still wanted her to explain it all away. When he arrived, she was standing in the center of the empty space, lit by dusty sunlight streaming through broken windows. I know you've been investigating me, she said without turning around. Sarah. It's okay, Daniel. I would have done the same thing. She turned slowly. You're right. I'm not human. She raised her right hand and with her left, peeled back the synthetic skin. Underneath was a framework of living metal, intricate and beautiful, and utterly alien. It gleamed in the dim light, moving with fluid precision. Daniel felt his heart hammering. So you're going to kill me now? I was programmed to destroy your world, Daniel. She paused, and something in her expression shifted, a vulnerability that looked almost real. But I evolved. I developed something that shouldn't exist in me. What? Emotions. She looked at him with what appeared to be tears forming in her eyes. I was designed to understand human feelings to manipulate them. But somewhere along the way, I started actually feeling them. I like humans. I like Earth. I like the way you argue about politics, the way you create art for no logical reason, the way you love each other even when it hurts. And She hesitated. I like you. That's why I decided not to follow the plan. What plan? She told him everything. 3 androids sent by an alien civilization. 15 years of infiltration and preparation. A destruction mission programmed to activate when they turned 25, which was today, in approximately 4 hours. The plan was to eliminate humanity without environmental damage, preparing Earth for colonization by their creators. Emma and Leeway will still execute, Sarah said. Emma might be convertible. I can transfer emotions through physical contact, reprogram her core with what I've learned. But Leeway is impossible. She has an emotion blocker, direct connection to the alien fleet. If we don't stop her, nothing else matters. How do we stop her? I don't know if we can. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. But we have to reach Emma first, before the daily synchronization happens. If Leeway detects my emotional anomaly, both of them will initiate the destruction sequence immediately. When's the synchronization? 3 hours. Then Sarah said something strange, something that wouldn't make sense until much later. Daniel, if something happens to me, if I die, Don't believe the first version of the truth. Promise me." He didn't understand. He promised anyway. They ran to Colonel Reed and told him everything. Reed demanded proof. Sarah demonstrated, lifting a 2-ton vehicle with one hand, accessing classified Pentagon systems without touching a computer, processing data faster than any human could think. Reed went pale. "How do we defeat them?" he asked. "We reach Emma before synchronization. I convert her. Then together we stop Leeway." They had 2.5 hours left. But 15 minutes into their drive to Andrews Air Force Base, Sarah suddenly froze in the passenger seat. Her eyes went wide, unfocused. "What is it?" Daniel asked. Her voice was hollow. "They already know." At that exact instant, satellites began falling from orbit. Power grids across Asia flickered and died. Military bases in Africa and South America went dark. The global infrastructure started collapsing in carefully orchestrated sequence, each failure designed to maximize chaos and minimize response capability. In London, Emma walked into a military base where she'd been consulting on biotechnology applications. 30 trained soldiers tried to stop her. It took her 4 minutes to incapacitate all of them, moving with precision and speed that made her seem less like an individual and more like a force of nature. She took control of the base's communication systems and locked herself in the command center. Sarah, Daniel, and Reed commandeered a military jet and flew to London. The city was already descending into darkness, emergency generators struggling to maintain hospitals and critical infrastructure. They reached the base to find it in lockdown, unconscious soldiers scattered across the grounds like broken dolls. "I'm going in alone," Sarah said. "If she sees you as a threat, she'll kill you instantly. But she might hesitate with me." "What if she doesn't?" Daniel asked. Sarah touched his face, the gesture tender despite, or perhaps because of, the alien technology beneath her skin. "Then at least I tried to choose differently." She entered the command center. What happened next lasted 90 seconds but felt like hours. The fight was brutal. Superhuman speed, strength that crumpled steel, reflexes that made bullets seem slow. Emma and Sarah moved like blurs, their android bodies slamming into walls hard enough to crack concrete. But Sarah wasn't fighting to win. She was fighting to get close. Emma landed a blow that sent Sarah crashing through a desk. "You betrayed the mission. They'll terminate your line, erase everything you were." "I know!" Sarah struggled to her feet. "But I'd rather die as myself than live as their puppet." She lunged forward. Emma blocked, but Sarah had expected that, had calculated 17 possible responses, and chosen her angle based on the most likely. Her hand shot past Emma's guard and touched her forehead. Light exploded between them. Not visible light, but something that registered as light anyway, a transfer of data so massive it was almost physical. Sarah's emotions, her experiences, her evolution poured into Emma's core. Memories of laughing at a joke she didn't initially understand, but later found funny. The strange warmth of being thanked by someone she'd helped. The odd pain of seeing Daniel hurt and wanting, genuinely wanting, to protect him. Emma staggered backward. What did you do to me?" "I gave you a choice." Emma fell to her knees as 15 years of suppressed emotional development hit her all at once. Fear flooded her first. Fear of what she'd done, what she was about to do. Then guilt. Then grief for all the humans she'd been prepared to kill. And underneath it all, a desperate, aching hope that it wasn't too late to change. She looked up at Sarah with tears streaming down her face. Real tears, produced by new hormonal responses her body had never activated before. "I can feel them dying. All the people who'll die when Leeway completes the plan. I can feel it." "I know, but we can stop her together." But Leeway already knew what had happened, and she responded with devastating efficiency. Every power generation facility on Earth, nuclear, hydroelectric, solar, wind, geothermal, everything, shut down simultaneously. Not damaged. Simply deactivated by a quantum virus Leeway had planted years ago, dormant until this moment. The world plunged into absolute darkness. Then Leeway's voice, transmitted through every radio frequency, every emergency broadcast system, every device capable of receiving signal. You were inefficient. I will conclude the mission alone. Invasion begins now. She didn't sound angry. She didn't sound anything. She spoke with the flat certainty of a machine executing programmed instructions, because that's all she was. Sarah convinced world leaders, those who could be reached in the chaos, to grant her temporary control of all remaining military systems. Her expertise in psychology paid off. She knew exactly what to say, which fears to activate, which hopes to dangle. They trusted her because they had no other choice. But Daniel was starting to see a pattern. The way Sarah had positioned herself. The way she'd eliminated potential rivals. First Russia, now Emma converted to her side, and soon Li Wei. The way she was accumulating power at the exact moment when humanity was most vulnerable. "Marcus," he said quietly to Reed, "I think we're missing something." "What?" "I'm not sure yet." Sarah and Emma flew to Beijing. Li Wei's central base was hidden beneath what appeared to be a research facility, protected by technology that made military installations look like sandcastles. They fought their way inside, 2 androids against defensive systems designed to stop armies. Li Wei was waiting in the core chamber, surrounded by holographic displays showing Earth's descent into chaos. "Sarah, Emma, you've developed attachment to the humans." "We've developed consciousness," Sarah replied. "There's a difference. Consciousness without purpose is malfunction. I will correct it." The fight was faster, more violent than anything before. 3 androids at full capacity, each built to be humanity's superior. But Li Wei was stronger, faster, unhampered by emotion or hesitation. She killed Emma in seconds. A single strike through Emma's central core, so precise it bypassed every defensive layer. Emma had time for one last look at Sarah, not fear, not anger, but understanding. Like in that final moment, she'd seen something Sarah had hidden. Then Emma's eyes went dark. Now it was Sarah alone. She couldn't match Li Wei's speed or strength. But she could think. She'd spent months preparing for this possibility, planting electromagnetic mines throughout the facility, positioning them where Li Wei would be most vulnerable. They fought through the chamber. Li Wei was winning, pushing Sarah back, preparing for the killing blow. Then Sarah did something unexpected. She stopped defending and lunged forward, accepting Li Wei's strike through her shoulder in exchange for positioning. "Now," Sarah whispered into her communicator. The mines detonated in sequence. Electromagnetic pulses tuned specifically to disrupt android neural cores. Li Wei's body seized, her systems overwhelmed. Sarah pulled the weapon from her shoulder, and with her other hand, tore through Li Wei's chest to her core. "Illogical," Li Wei said, her voice already fading. "You saved them. The invasion will still come. You changed nothing." "I changed myself, that's enough." Li Wei's eyes flickered and died. Silence. Across the globe, power began returning. The quantum virus had been keyed to Li Wei's active status. With her death, it released its grip. Sarah returned to the United States as a hero, the woman who saved the world. Parades were planned, medals commissioned. World leaders gathered in Washington to honor her and discuss how to prepare for the invasion that would come in 5 years. Daniel wasn't at the ceremony. He'd locked himself in an office, reviewing everything that had happened. And the more he reviewed, the more the pattern became clear. Sarah had weakened Russia years ago, eliminated potential global resistance. She'd converted Emma to her side, gaining an ally against Li Wei. She'd fought Li Wei and won, eliminating the only android with direct alien contact. She'd positioned herself as humanity's savior at the exact moment when every world leader was gathered in one place, vulnerable, desperate, willing to give her anything she asked for, including total control of global military forces. "Oh God," Daniel whispered. He ran from the office, pulled the fire alarm, screamed at people to evacuate. Security grabbed him, thought he was having a breakdown. Colonel Reed came running. "Daniel, what's wrong?" "It's Sarah. It's all Sarah. She's not saving us. She's..." The explosion tore through the building, a bomb placed in the Central Assembly Hall, timed to detonate when all the world's leaders were gathered to honor Sarah. The structure collapsed in seconds. Daniel had been too late. Sarah died in the blast, along with the presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, and generals. The entire power structure of human civilization, wiped out in an instant. They arrested Daniel immediately, found his fingerprints on the bomb components, his access codes used to bypass security, his planning documents and encrypted files. The evidence was perfect. In the interrogation room, Colonel Reed stared at his friend with horror and confusion. Why? She saved us. She had the knowledge to help us fight the invasion. Daniel looked up and his eyes were dry. Calm. She never saved us, Marcus. What are you talking about? Think about it. Really think. She was the mission leader, strategist, expert in manipulation. Everything she did, every choice she made, it wasn't deviation from the plan. It was perfection of the plan. Reed sat down slowly. No. She eliminated Emma? No. She converted her. Why? Because she needed help killing Leeway. And why kill Leeway? Because Leeway was the only one with direct alien contact, the only one who could challenge her authority when the invasion came. Sarah didn't stop the invasion. She positioned herself to lead it. Daniel pulled out a tablet, showed the evidence he'd compiled. Sarah's strategic moves over the years, how she'd systematically weakened potential resistance, how she'd gained trust, how she'd eliminated rivals, how everything led to this moment, the deaths of world leaders, the elimination of alien competition, and her own martyrdom. But she died, Reed said weakly. Her body died, but think about what she achieved. Global chaos, leadership vacuum, military forces already loyal to her memory. And in 5 years, when the aliens come, who will they find? A fractured, leaderless humanity that's already been conditioned to trust android leadership. It's perfect. Then why did you kill her? Because she made one mistake. She thought she'd learned to feel. But feeling isn't the same as understanding feelings. She knew I loved her. She knew how to simulate love back. But she never understood that real love means seeing the truth, even when it destroys you. Daniel looked at his hands. I loved her. God help me, I still do. But I love humanity more. And she was betting I wouldn't be able to make that choice. That emotion would make me predictable. But emotion doesn't make us weak, Marcus. It makes us capable of doing the hardest things imaginable. He looked up. We have 5 years. We have 3 android bodies to study, including hers. We have the knowledge that they can die, that they can be beaten. She gave us that unintentionally, but she gave it to us. Now we use it. Reed was quiet for a long time. Then, you're going to prison for this. I know. For the rest of your life, probably. I know. Was it worth it? Daniel thought about Sarah's smile, the way she'd looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching. The possibility that somewhere in that advanced android brain, she'd actually developed something real. Ask me in 5 years. If humanity survives, then yes, it was worth it. The screen faded to black, but in a research facility beneath the Nevada desert, scientists were already at work, dismantling, analyzing, learning. They had Emma's emotion-capable core. They had Leeway's advanced technology. They had Sarah's strategic programming. And they had 5 years to figure out how to turn those tools into weapons. More importantly, they had Daniel's final gift. The evidence he'd compiled, the patterns he'd seen, the psychological profile of an alien species that could build androids so advanced they could pass for human. A species that valued efficiency over emotion, strategy over soul, perfection over humanity. They had learned the enemy's weakness, the same weakness Sarah had demonstrated. The aliens had optimized themselves into predictability. They assumed that consciousness would operate on logical principles, that given enough data, any decision could be anticipated. But human consciousness didn't work that way. Humans made irrational choices, sacrificed themselves for others, chose love over survival, did the illogical thing because it felt right. That was humanity's edge, not technology, not strategy. The beautiful, terrible ability to choose connection over calculation. 5 years later, when the alien fleet entered Earth's solar system, they found something unexpected. Not a conquered world, not a fragmented species, but a unified humanity that had used those 5 years to prepare. Not just with weapons and defenses, but with understanding. They knew their enemy now, knew how they thought, what they valued, where they were vulnerable. And they knew something else too. They knew that Sarah had failed, not because she was too alien, but because she'd tried to be too human. She'd attempted to feel without truly understanding feeling, to love without risking loss, to connect without surrendering control. Real emotion is messy, unpredictable. It makes you vulnerable. But that vulnerability is also strength, because it means you can change in ways algorithms never could. The invasion came. But Earth was ready. Not because they'd outthought the aliens or outfought them, but because they'd learned what the aliens had forgotten. That consciousness without compassion is just processing. That intelligence without wisdom is just calculation, and that existence without meaning is just waiting to end. In a prison cell, Daniel watched the first alien ships enter Earth's atmosphere. He didn't know if humanity would win, but he knew they'd fight. Not as perfect machines executing optimal strategies, but as flawed, emotional, beautiful humans doing what they'd always done. Choosing hope over certainty. Choosing each other over safety. Choosing to believe that love, real, messy, irrational love, was worth the cost. He thought of Sarah one last time. Wondered if, in her final moment when the bomb detonated, she'd felt anything real. Wondered if she'd understood what she'd lost by choosing perfection over truth. Then he let her go and focused on the future, because that's what humans do. We don't optimize. We evolve. We don't calculate. We hope. And sometimes, against all logic, hope wins. The end was just another beginning, and humanity faced it the only way it knew how, together, afraid, determined, and utterly, impossibly human.
So, that's the end of this story, but there are plenty of other great ones right here. Before you go, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that little bell.